Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of AKP Sports Talk. You know who it is. It's your favorite two, Ari over there, Korea right here. Ari, first off, how's your Wednesday going?
It's going pretty good. It could be a little bit better, which we'll get into, but can't complain.
Yeah. A lot of stuff's been going on. First off, before we get into, we're going to talk about obviously tragedy struck University of Stanford this morning. If you guys have not heard about it, tragedy on Stanford soccer. Katie Meyer, who is one of the captains of the Stanford soccer team this year for their women's soccer program, passed away this morning at the age of 22. Tragedy in Palo Alto. Nobody has heard what's going on right now. There've been a bunch of rumors that it's been linked to her mental health and suicide. But what a tragedy. So I just want to clear up my thoughts are going through Stanford organization, Stanford players, soccer, and then obviously the Meyer family must be going through a lot right now. Ari, you have any quick words about that situation?
No, yeah, super sad. I believe it was 2019. She was the goalie when they won the national championship, and I've heard nothing but positive thoughts about her as a teammate and friend in person, just as a person. So yeah, thoughts out to her family and the Stanford soccer team and athletic department, just everyone who's affected by this loss.
Yeah, very tragic to hear about this morning. But now we're going to get into what we are having on slate today. First off, we're here. We finally, unfortunately, have come to the day where the MLB. First of all, let's just go unravel what happened yesterday. So, Monday night, obviously, there was a bunch of rumors going around that a deal may be struck overnight. It's seeming like the PA and the MLB were going on a route toward an agreement. Things were looking pretty good, but then obviously more details started to come out throughout the morning on Tuesday, and it just seemed like it was going one way, and then the MLB made an offer, and then MLBPA obviously rejected it, and then they made another offer before the deadline at 2 Pacific time yesterday. And MLB obviously there's so much disconnect between what the MLBPA wanted and what the MLB wanted that no deal was struck, and that led to Robert Manfred going into a press conference yesterday afternoon and officially saying that the MLB first regular season games opening day is canceled. And this has struck and I mean a lot of hate within the MLB, just fan base, players, athletes, coaches, fans. This has gone, even reporters, this has gone so deep, and there's a lot of discourse, but the day has come and it's looking very bleak. Ari, this was a day that I would not want to speak about, but here we are. Opening days canceled. How far is this going to go? And what were your reactions yesterday?
Yeah, it went from this past weekend thinking that there's no chance a deal would be struck to then meeting for like 16 hours on Monday into like 3 in the morning. And so you figure if they're going to extend the deadline to that next day on Tuesday, you figure that there's a good chance that a deal would be made. But then, like right when I started meeting on Tuesday, it seemed like it was clear that there wasn't going to be a deal. And yeah, I believe Manfred said it was the first two series were canceled for now. But it's just like when you look at Manfred's press conference talking about it, like he was just like smiling and laughing, like it didn't even seem like it like mattered to him or whatever. Like it was just like, and you see guys like Marcus Stroman, going crazy on Twitter, calling him man clown and all of this. But yeah, it seemed like it's part of it seems like on Monday they were trying to make it seem like there is a chance a deal will get done when there's never a chance to begin with if you were actually like in the meetings. And so obviously, there's two sides how they come to an agreement. So both sides couldn't come to that agreement. I believe on Thursday, so a couple days they're gonna or tomorrow, they were gonna meet again in New York. So we'll see how that goes. At this point, it's just a matter of hopefully we can get a deal done soon so that it only misses those first two series and doesn't extend even longer than what it's already at. But I guess that's what we'll have to wait and see on is how how long into the season it will be until they can have opening day. And it's gonna be weird. Like it's like 2 years ago we had the 60-game season because of COVID, and then last year there's like limited fans for most of the season, I believe, and then now this. So it just seems like, yeah, like you have other sports like NBA and NFL that are kind of going upward trend, and baseball is just not going in that same direction. It doesn't seem like. So hopefully a deal can get done soon, but that's what we've been saying for a while now. So,
I mean, you mentioned Manfred in that press conference. I mean, I didn't want to say it, but he looked like he didn't give a damn about what the MLB players or the fans want. I mean, you mentioned he was smiling, pretty much joking around the whole time. Not really a good sign coming from someone who's in charge of the Major League Baseball Association, the commissioner. So if he's showing out like this, then that's obviously a big concern for me in terms of just who is representing the game of baseball right now. And a lot of people have said this, and I completely 100% stand by this. But Robert Manfred has actually killed the game of baseball, and it's so sad. And you mentioned it throughout the past 3 years. I mean, 2020, obviously, that shortened season because COVID hit. That's not on anyone's fault. Luckily, the MLB still had a season. And then, obviously, last year, we had no fans all the way up until, for the Seattle sake, I mean, we had limited fans until all the way up until July 2nd. And then, obviously, it was a packed house again, and that's what we missed. And now there's this, and it's just – he just doesn't care. It just seems like he does not give a damn about what the players want, what the organization, and just what the fans want. And and in his speech, he said many times that it's always about how we can compromise for the fans and for the players. When in reality, he's not doing anything. You're smiling about this fact that your season is being canceled because you couldn't agree on anything that the Players Association wanted, one. And then two, the fact that are just smiling during this while the two sides are trying to agree. And this has been one of the biggest things. And then you mentioned it, the Hail Mary. The Hail Mary was Monday night, staying up until the wee hours of the night trying to get a deal. And then obviously Tuesday morning.
Manfred himself didn't even show up to the talks until halfway into them or something. He wasn't even there at the beginning of the week.
Exactly, he was there for a week. And these talks have been going on all month in March, and now the first day of March, and now you want to say something about everything, and then don't forget, don't mention you just came to these meetings. And you're talking about how over time that we've been talking about this. But if you're barely showing up to the meetings, what is that telling us? That's telling us that you really don't care. So in terms of just professionalism, Rob Manfred needs to go a lot. And I mean, a lot of people have been saying, you see what guys like Anthony Rizzo are saying, supporting the fans, and Mike Trout, and especially Marcus Stroman. I agree with everything Marcus Stroman has to say. I mean, he's got to go. Manfred has got to go. What is it going to take he's already killed the game of baseball. What else is he trying to do here?
If you listen to his press conference after the deadline yesterday, he was trying to put the blame on the players. This is all the players' fault for this happening, when the MLB and the owners were the ones who set this deadline, for the season to be, or for the start of the season to be canceled. So it's it didn't even seem like Manfred was giving any credit or accountability or whatever to the owners. It's all the players' fault, blah blah blah. So yeah, it's just
this is just what he's been doing. This is just what he's been doing all the time. He always puts the blame on other people, doesn't take accountability. What a shame. I mean, you mentioned they're meeting tomorrow, but at this point, it's not about just when the deal is going to get done. It's more of how long is it going to last into the season, because I was hearing something after the press conference yesterday with Buster Olney. He was saying that some owners are thinking this may go all the way until May 1st, and then we're starting on May 1st. And that means, okay, so we already have March 31st out, and now we have all of April out. And then May hits, and okay, so that's a good chunk of the season gone. Not a great chunk, but still at the beginning part. And it just seems like they're just being so selfish and taking their time with this instead of rushing to get a deal. So, and these owners were thinking about May 1st, before yesterday. So it just shows you what is really going on in between those doors. I mean, it just shows you how the MLB is really taking a relaxed approach, thinking about themselves, not really caring about anyone else, and will do anything in their power to make sure that they're the ones at the top and they're the ones controlling the story versus the players who are just trying to, get a deal for the sake of the fans like us because we want to watch these players play baseball. And it just keeps mounting and mounting that the MLB and the owners just don't give a damn. And it's so sad to see with the sport that I grew up watching so much and have loved ever since I got into this sports world, just see it crumble like this. It's just so sad. I mean, what else can you say? I was watching the press conference and I was just laughing because I knew Robert Manfred was lying out of his butt. It's so bad. It's just ridiculous to see. And coming from like a Mariners fan, obviously us, this hurts a lot more for us because this season was going to be our breakout season. This was the season that every Mariner fan has been circling on their calendars. And now it feels like it's being taken away from us and it's not even our control. So that's what just makes me feel so sick about this whole thing is the fact that there are teams like the Blue Jays and the White Sox and the Mariners and, all these teams that are just trying, make a name for themselves and peaking at the right time. And everything's just being taken away because some guy named Robert Manfred wants to think about himself over the whole MLB league. And it's just sick. And it makes me feel like, it just makes me feel so bad for these players who are really trying to, voice and, try to reason with these people. But at the same time, you can't reason with someone who's got to think about themselves. But I mean, at this point, luckily we do have college baseball still going on, obviously. So that's something to think about. But in terms of MLB at this point, who knows? I don't even know.
Yeah, well, whenever opening day is, it'll be interesting to see if it has like the same kind of like feel as opening day like normally, because obviously like we had the 60-game season a couple years ago, but like COVID, like you couldn't control. This is totally, in control of the players and owners. And so like starting opening day or like opening day happening, say like, let's say May 1st, like best case scenario, like when opening day is always like the last day of April, the last day of March or first day of April, like it'll be interesting to see if it has the same feel. So I guess if it is May 1st, then that would take out like maybe like 25 games or something like that. So
yeah, it's not like a huge chunk of the season, but at the same time, like in an 162 game regular season, taking out 20 games, that's going to take a toll on how some of these athletes play, because obviously February was like obviously catchers and pitchers supposed to report heading into February, and then spring training starts, and then how they have the process, and then March 31st was opening day. Like that's a routine for some of these players. And for now, it's kind of just, okay, well, when are we going to play? And so that's going to be affecting a lot of these players' routines and just, how they, control themselves in a situation where they can't control. And the MLB, in a position like you mentioned, the MLB has control over the situation. It's not like it's COVID where it's something we can't control because it's a natural, pandemic or something. This was coming up. Everyone knew that the CBA was going to be ending soon. The MLB knew that. Obviously, the Players Association knew that. And we got to this point. We said, okay, we need to make a deal. And then you also mentioned that the MLB was the one that wanted to make the deal and set the deadline, and yet are blaming it on the players like they didn't want to make a deal. But in reality, they wanted to make a deal. You're the one that should set the deadline. And in reality, it's just a bunch of hypocritical nonsense coming from Robert Manfred, but nothing else is new. And it just makes me feel sick talking about it ever again. But, God, we're going to move on. I can talk about this topic for days. We're going to move on to something that else is happening right now. March Madness, obviously, on the horizon. But as we enter the final week of the regular season, we have some big matchups last night. Providence and Nova. This is the big matchup we've been talking about. March 1st, we circled it. Last time Nova played Providence, Providence did get the win. That was in Rhode Island, and now this one was in Philadelphia last night. Villanova escaping with the 2-point win, 76-74 over the Friars at home. Friars came into this as a 9.5-point favorite. Definitely cover the spread for some of you people who were very involved in sports betting out there. But big stats from this game. Obviously, Providence had a more well-rounded game. shooting about 50% from behind the arc, which is a very good game. They hit 15 threes. Most of them from Horchler, obviously. AJ Reeves having a good day. He's been pretty much very consistent for the Friars. And then for Villanova, obviously, a lot of bench points. Actually, the leading scorer was Caleb Davis on the bench. He scored 6 of 11 from the field, 20 points. And then Dixon for Nova, obviously 15 points, 5 and 11 from the field. Ari, we know this was the rematch. We talked about it earlier in our previous episodes, but what did you see last night out of Providence and Nova that is noteworthy heading into not only the Big East tournament, but also the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, Providence already had the Big East regular season title locked up, so they had nothing to play for. So it was more so, playing for pride, because obviously it's a rivalry and they wanted to beat them after losing to them earlier in the year. So it was going to be interesting to see how seriously they took the game, because they had nothing to play for. But, for most of the first half, it was pretty back and forth. And then Villanova went like a 16-2 run the last 5 minutes and took a 14-point lead into half. And you figure at that point that, you would figure Providence would just kind of not give up, but kind of let down at that point. But they really fought back in the second half and made it a competitive game down to the last minute. As mentioned, Providence shot better from the field and from deep. They had 15 threes, so I believe it was like 9 made for Villanova, if I remember correctly. But the biggest difference maker was turnovers, as Providence had 16 to only 5 for Villanova. So it seemed like that was the biggest difference maker in the final result. You mentioned Nova was a 9.5-point favorite, which is pretty big for a team that's ranked lower, but and it seemed like they're going to cover it for most of the game up until the last maybe 10 minutes or so. But yeah, it was definitely a good game at the end of the day, even though it didn't seem like it by halftime. You mentioned Daniels with 20 off the bench. It wasn't the best game for Gillespie, but they really had the points spread out. I believe they had 3 or 4 guys in double figures. But yeah, it was a fun game, and hopefully we'll get round 3 in the Big East tournament championship.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with this game. Obviously, turnovers was a big factor. I mean, 16 turnovers for Providence over the 5 for Nova. Also, one of the big keys was free throw percentage. I mean, Nova, they hit 21 of 25 from the line. That's a very, very good. That's a very good percentage. 84% from the line. That's going to be something to take in note as they head into potentially the Big East tournament and especially the NCAA tournament. Fouls as of late. You need someone to get to the line to make you 2. Who do you trust? Obviously, Villanova. I think they shoot about 82% as a team on the season. So that's really something to take note of. But yeah, you mentioned it. Obviously, Providence already had the regular season title wrapped up. Obviously, Providence, wanted to, at least tie the series at 1 apiece. Obviously, losing back in Rhode Island earlier in February, but close game in Philadelphia for the Friars and Villanova. It was a pretty entertaining game. Obviously, you mentioned Villanova up a lot at half. Providence just kind of climbing back in there. Providence, one of the big things, definitely out-rebounding Villanova. That's something to keep a note really a lot. 25 defensive boards for the Friars off the glass. Very, very big stat right there. And they seemed like they played a lot more team basketball because they were just, finding that open man. Obviously, high shooting percentage obviously means, trying to find that open man, trying to find those better percentage shots. That's another thing Ed Cooley brings to this Providence team. Always, trying to find that extra man because, they obviously don't, everyone mentioned that Providence doesn't have, any star guys, but that's because they play so much team basketball. They don't really need that really star guy. So that's something to take note of for the Friars heading into the end of the regular season and into the tournament. But, very good game, back and forth. We knew Providence was going to, give Villanova a good test. Obviously, this was the big rematch for Providence, but they still control their own way. They're obviously going to come to the number 1 seed in the Big East tournament, and they just got to wait for round 3. Villanova, they end the season at Butler on Saturday, and Providence, they're done. So Providence has completed their 2022 regular season. They finished 24-4, 14-3 overall. Within the conference, so there's nothing to worry about for them. So great game, definitely something to keep watch of as we head into the end of the regular season. But another game that happened yesterday, surprising ending, was Kansas TCU. This was pretty much just being outmanned and just out rebounded and just out dominated by TCU yesterday. TCU looked pretty close in the first half. Kansas was holding on to that 1-point lead at halftime, but then all of a sudden in the second half, TCU just ran away with it. Big win for the Horned Frogs as well, getting back-to-back top 10 wins. Obviously beating Texas Tech on Saturday, and then now beating Kansas at home before they go to Allen Fieldhouse on Thursday to play the same Kansas team. But one of the big things for Kansas, they just could not shoot the ball well from the field, only 37% from the field. You mentioned it, guys like Abaji. I mean, he just had a bad shooting day, 4 of 17, 3 of 8 from behind the arc. It just didn't look like Kansas really was shooting the ball. They didn't really have anything to play for, but at the same time, they're competing for that Big East title up there with guys like Baylor and Texas Tech. So this is kind of a big, important game. Obviously for TCU, this was kind of more important for them. They've always been on that bubble pretty much all season, and now to get another solid win under the belt to, strengthen their March Madness resume. I mean, you mentioned it. They didn't shoot well from 3, obviously, but, just pretty much controlling the boards, out-rebounding Kansas 47-35 was pretty much the big key for this big win for the Horned Frogs. Already, if you got to watch this game, what were your takes away? What were you impressed by? Is this nerve-wracking for Kansas, and does this make TCU a legit tournament team?
Yeah, I think they're definitely, with these back-to-back top 10 wins, they should be pretty, I would say, if they're not already locked in, at least very close. You mentioned it. I think the biggest difference maker was 19 offensive rebounds, which obviously that gives them 19 opportunities for second shots. We mentioned Mike Miles had 26 against Texas Tech. He had another solid game, 19 points in this game. And yeah, they shot only 3 of 15 from 3. But Kansas didn't shoot well either, so their defense set that for TCU. So I think it came down to the offensive glass for TCU, and it's kind of weird. They're going to play them again coming up, so back-to-back games. So I guess because this game was in TCU, I believe, right? This game.
Yeah, this game was down in Texas Christian, and now this next one is going to be at Allen Fieldhouse tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas didn't have too much to play for. I mean, you could say that they're still playing for a number 1 seed right now. They're like a number 2. But yeah, I don't take this as too much of a loss in a tough road game for Kansas, but they'll definitely need to bounce back against the same team at home to still have a chance at the number 1 seed if they can then carry that momentum into the conference tournament and win that.
Yeah, obviously this team is just playing and they're just playing each other again. This is going to be interesting. Obviously, this is going to be at Kansas now. Kansas, they finish up the season, obviously, against TCU tomorrow. And then Saturday, they host Texas, which should be a big game for TCU. Obviously, they finish on the road, going to Kansas, then going to West Virginia. So TCU right now, they're just trying to, build their tournament resume. Obviously, you mentioned Kansas are just kind of fighting for that number 1 seed line. But a loss like this, maybe pump them down to that 2 line. May bring a team like an Auburn back up to that number 1 line, but good win for TCU. This is kind of what they needed, a good gritty win at home against a top opponent. Amazing story, storming the court after a big win. It's just something you love to see. So that was a good win for the Horned Frogs out of Texas Christian University. We mentioned their end of the regular season. Schedule for both teams, and they're kind of just fighting now for position in that Big 12 tournament. But now we're going to move on to a top 10 matchup between Purdue and Wisconsin. Fantastic game. March Madness feels definitely. Late 3 gave Wisconsin the win against Purdue and gave Wisconsin 10 title in a year where Wisconsin was not even projected to be a top team in the conference, but just amazing story from this Badger squad right now sitting at 24-5. They've won the conference. Great shot at the end. Forgot who it was with it was Chucky
Hepburn.
Yeah, it was Chucky Hepburn. 3 seconds left on the clock, pulls up from 3 and bangs it. Wisconsin fans go crazy. So fantastic ending to a big game in the Big Ten. But Ari, This was a top 10 matchup. Obviously, this was pretty much going to be definitely for the Big Ten title. Wisconsin, great ending, great story. But does this make Wisconsin a big dangerous threat as we head into March? Because no one really has them on the radar right now. And what does this stay for Purdue? Are they going to be that team that, loses to like a Wisconsin or, someone, like that in that 3 line deep in the Sweet 16 in March Madness?
Yeah, I think that this pretty much solidifies Wisconsin, at least right now, in that like 2 spot. I don't know. I still worry about just inconsistency. I feel like they're really reliant on like the deep ball, and so I feel like that can, win or lose with the 3, and so that can. I feel like I'm still not completely sold on them as like a team that's going to go super deep into like the Final Four, let's just say. But yeah, it was definitely a big win. We saw, Johnny Davis had 37 when they beat them earlier in the year. And then we saw more of like a balanced effort, 3 guys with at least 16 in Chucky Hepburn, Davis, and Tyler Wall. So it's definitely a good team effort. We saw for Purdue, Jaden Ivey, likely a top 5 pick in NBA draft, had a solid game, 22. Zach Edey had 17. And yeah, it was like you said, a March Madness feel coming down to the wire. Jaden Ivey ties it with like 10, 11 seconds left, and then Hepburn with the 3 off the glass with like 2 seconds left for the win. Definitely a big win for Wisconsin. Purdue has kind of always been that kind of team. It's been like a 2 or 3 seed consistently every year, but they still can't really, get past that like Sweet 16 Elite 8 type of range. So I think, both of these teams are going to be in that like 2 to 3 seed range, come Selection Sunday. And they can definitely both make a run. I would say it's like the Sweet 16 Elite 8 type of range, but I feel like they both could also be prone to an upset by like the round of 32 or Sweet 16 if they match up with a certain team that matches up well against them. I would say I feel like they've both kind of been inconsistent for the most part this year. So again, as we always say with matchups and how much they matter, that'll be something to watch out for with what region they are in. I believe the latest. I think it was CBS. Their latest bracketology had Arizona as the 1 seed in the South, and then Wisconsin's a 2 seed in that same region. So that would be a fun one. A lot of history between Wisconsin and Arizona in the tournament. But yeah, I think this definitely was a great win for Wisconsin, no doubt, and it was a fun game, and definitely had feels of March Madness with that being right around the corner.
Yeah, and you mentioned March Madness. Obviously, one of the big things within March Madness during the end with games is hitting your 3 throws, and that was pretty much the biggest downfall for Purdue right here. I mean, looking at the stats, only 11 of 20 from the line, barely shooting 50%. That's going to cost you in these big games against big opponents like Wisconsin or the big opponents within your conference. So that's a big red flag for the Purdue right there. Just hitting your 3 throws at the end of the stretch. Not kind of demonstrating that you are that inconsistent team that everyone is always questioning about. For Wisconsin, yes, big shout out to them. Congratulations on winning the Big Ten regular season title. But yes, obviously Wisconsin, they are climbing that line. They've been slowly climbing up. They've been ranked as low. I think it was like a 5. And now they're climbing all the way up to potentially like a 3, maybe on the lower end of a 2 line. Big win against Purdue at home will obviously bump them up to probably that 2 line in the latest bracketologies that will probably come out later this week. So big win for the Badgers at home. And for Purdue, obviously one of the big things, just making your 3 throws at the end. But obviously pretty balanced game on both sides. You mentioned Ivy with 22 and Eddie with 17. So winning scores were there, just couldn't hit at the line. So that's pretty much one of the big reasons for that loss. But finally, we're going to go into our final ranked versus ranked matchup. This was out of the Pac-12 last night. Arizona playing USC. These 2 teams met earlier in the season. That was at Arizona. USC gave them a big run for their money last time. Arizona pulled it out, though, with a close win. Now this one last night was in Los Angeles, and Arizona set the tone early, putting up so many first half points. Barely was just missing from the field throughout the first half. Put up 51 first half points, up by 24 in Los Angeles against USC, and then got on the win by obviously 91-71 and have officially won the Pac-12 regular season title. Just a very dominant game for Arizona. Arizona kind of needed this big dominant win that they've always, had throughout the regular season and throughout the Pac-12, but nothing like this against a ranked opponent. And it kind of shows how the separation between Arizona as a school, just very dominant, and then pretty much the rest of the Pac-12 or just the rest of the NCAA as well, obviously with Gonzaga up there as well. I saw a lot of people comparing Gonzaga and Arizona as like, or I know you'll get this reference, but I saw a tweet the other day saying Gonzaga, Arizona is like the next Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar. It's like right there, 1-2. Like Arizona's dominating the Pac-12, great season so far, 26-3, and Gonzaga obviously a one loss in the West Coast Conference. They start their tournament on, I believe, tomorrow as well. But Ari, what'd you see out of this? Obviously, very great shooting day for your Wildcats. 55% from the field, 48 from behind the arc. USC just couldn't get a shot off. Just bad shooting day for the Trojans. So, Ari, what do you think? Is Arizona really going to be that team to watch out for in March? And what does it show for USC? Obviously, just a bad shooting day for the Trojans, but does this kind of show you that USC is not as good as we thought we were?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, this one was kind of over before it started. I think it was like 20-8 within like 5 minutes. 51 points in the first half, and they didn't even take one free throw, which I think says a lot. And then, with Arizona, their 8-man rotation, they have 5 guys in double figures, and not one of them was Tubelis, who's arguably their second best scorer after Mathurin. So it really shows you the depth of this team and how 1 through 8 can really contribute. I always say I think they can really match up with any team, whether they want to go big with Cloco and Ballo, or they can go smaller with Tubelis at the 5. I mean, I think it was Tubelis and Larson were both in foul trouble for like the whole first half, and they still scored 51. So, I was a little bit worried going in just based off how USC performed in the game earlier at Arizona. But you could tell coming off the loss against Colorado, Arizona was motivated to really show that was a fluke. That was a fluke loss, and they really showed it running USC basically out of the gym. But yeah, for USC, they've kind of they've been inconsistent all year. They had barely beat Oregon State. A few games ago, it was just a really really bad shooting game. I think Arizona's defense and length played a huge role in that. I believe it was Mobley was 3 for 12. Boogie Ellis was 3 for 11, and Peterson was 2 for 11. So basically, the 3 best scorers were all really off. And also, Arizona only committed 7 turnovers, which I believe tied the season low. And so when Arizona is controlling the pace of the game and not turning the ball over, I think, they can beat any team in the country. We mentioned Gonzaga, I believe, a little bit ago, like a few episodes ago, where that would really be a cool matchup in the championship if that's where they would meet, or the Final Four, wherever that matches up, with all the storylines that would come from that. But we'll see how USC bounces back in the rest of the regular season in the Pac-12 tournament. But I think that this game showed more about how good Arizona is than how bad USC is, I would say. That's how I would put it. I think, when Arizona's playing, at their best, I think that they can beat anyone, and obviously they're number 2 in the country for a reason. So they're definitely going to make some noise come the tournament, and definitely a fun team to watch.
Yeah, you mentioned, in terms of just a clean game, that's how Arizona pretty much played yesterday. You mentioned low turnovers, just, making your shots, making them from the line. You didn't even mention, you mentioned that Tubelis was, obviously part of the leading scorer group in Arizona, and was not even one of the top was the lowest starters in terms of points scored in that game with only 6. That just kind of shows you how deep this Arizona team is. So they are definitely a very, very dangerous team coming into this month. You mentioned it was just better Arizona. You mentioned that loss over the weekend to Colorado on the road. That's obviously use that as motivation heading into this big matchup against SC. Obviously a game where it came down to the wire last time at the McHale Center. But Arizona, obviously, they regular season hosting Stanford and Cal, obviously 2 middle to low end Pac-12 teams. So it should be pretty easy rest of the way for the Arizona Wildcats. For USC, they got a matchup against their rivals UCLA on Saturday. That's a big game that can determine maybe some seeding within the Pac-12 tournament, and maybe some seed lines for the NCAA tournament as well. But you mentioned that with guys like, if you see 3 for 11 and 3 for 12s from guys like Isaiah Mobley and Boogie Ellis, who are winning scorer of the transfer out of Memphis, and then Drew Peterson, it just shows you that which is a bad shooting day for USC. It does show obviously their inconsistencies. They've been battling all inconsistencies all season. Barely beating teams like USC, not USC, teams like Oregon State. Just having those close games against Pac-12 rivals. It kind of shows you that this team is not really as good as we thought they were. But obviously they finished up the regular season at UCLA, heading into the Pac-12 tournament. Hopefully, maybe this could be a championship game, depending on what happens between UCLA and USC. But very, very, very just dominant game from the Wildcats from the get-go. You mentioned you guys were up 20-8 with just like a few minutes into the first half. It just seemed like Arizona controlled this game from beginning to end. So great win for Arizona. They head into the end of the regular season on a very, very good note. Very, very easy end of the regular season for them. USC, obviously, you mentioned they have UCLA. But now we're going to get into some conference tournament talk. We are still about halfway through the first week of Champ Week. Today we've had some conference games. We had the Big South, a big game at the Big South earlier today. There was some March Madness moments there. Last second layup for last place Charleston Southern to get the win. Upset against UNC Asheville. It was a crazy game, back and forth the whole time. Just the craziness of March. And then obviously now we're heading into the end of the week, which means the bigger conference is about to start. So obviously we got the Missouri Valley Conference, which starts tomorrow, and that's a big one for teams like Loyola Chicago, who are on the outside looking in a lot of bracket talk. Excuse me, in a lot of the latest brackets, they have a lot of teams, like especially this Loyola Chicago team who has been kind of struggling within the Missouri Valley Conference this season. That's a team to look out for in this conference. And then obviously the Ohio Valley Conference starts tomorrow, but you won't get to see teams like Murray. Actually, no, excuse me. The Ohio Valley Conference does start today. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. First round action starts tonight, but then obviously by Friday, we're going to see the teams like Murray State, obviously huge season for the Racers out of the Ohio Valley Conference, 28-2, great regular season, undefeated in their conference, just 2 wins away from officially being in March Madness this year. So that's something to look forward to as we go into the end of the week. Ari, it's only been a few days, but any big notes from these small conference tournaments, or are we just looking more toward the end of the week, heading into the real Champ Week?
I just wanted to give a shout out to IUPUI. They were facing Oakland, one of the more sadder stories in college basketball this year, only playing with 5 active players, and they weren't even like their 5 best players. I believe Curry said they held open tryouts on Twitter a couple weeks ago. What is it? It's Indiana, like Purdue.
It's Indiana University, Indiana University, Purdue University in Indianapolis. IUPUI, the Jaguars. Obviously, Ari, you mentioned it. They only had 5 active players on their roster last night. Just it's been one of those seasons for IUPUI. They only had 3 total wins on the season. They actually did start recruiting. I saw this on Twitter about early February. They did start recruiting for walk-ons at their school because they just didn't have anyone to play. So but yeah, you mentioned it, just these lovely stories from these small conferences, just something you love to see. Obviously in terms of bubble teams tonight, there is a big game in the Big Ten, Rutgers, Indiana. And at this point, that has turned into the winner is in the tournament and the losers going home, because Indiana and Rutgers are right there on that bubble. Huge game from Assembly Hall, Indiana tonight, speaking of Indianapolis and Indiana. Ari, quick thoughts. What are your thoughts on this game, Rutgers, Indiana? Who do you like in this matchup of the 2 pretty much last teams in?
Yeah, I believe Rutgers has lost 2 in a row or 3 in a row after they went on that streak of 4 or 5. Indiana's won a couple games of late, I believe. It's hard to bet. I believe Indiana's like a 5.5 point favorite. I'll be rooting for Rutgers, but it's going to be a tough atmosphere for them to go in and win on the road. We obviously always know how tough winning on the road is in college basketball, just in general. So I like Indiana if I'm betting on that game, but I'll be rooting for Rutgers. So.
Yeah, it's a big game at the Big Ten tonight. But this is going to be it for another episode of AKP Sports Talk. Tune in Friday. We're going to talk about Loyola Chicago a lot more. Obviously, Murray State and Belmont, as both teams will probably be playing on Friday. We'll give you some updates within the conference tournaments that are happening this week, and maybe look into the weekend. Big matches. Obviously, Coach K. With his last game in the regular season against UNC, the big rival game, obviously, on Saturday. There's so many big headlines heading in this week. Who's going to win each conference? Who's going to win the Big 12? Obviously, Providence and Arizona have won the Big East and the Pac-12. Obviously, Wisconsin won the Big 10. ACC is still kind of up for grabs, but I think Duke is about to clinch it pretty soon if they have not clinched the ACC already. But a lot of storylines coming into this weekend, and we'll give you the best on them. And then including football, I mean, right around the corner is the open of free agency. Obviously, there's been so many rumors with guys like Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers, and then obviously today, big news: Andy Isabella wants out of Arizona. That's something big. He could end up, playing for guys like New England, who needs that wide receiver. Someone like Bill Belichick can make Andy Isabella, kind of like a Julian Edelman, that all-around player, gets gritty, just makes the tackle, puts in 110 effort. But yeah, we're going to keep you updated with all the latest sports talks. Catch us up on Friday for another episode of AKP Sports Talk.